South Africa. And this year it is going to be a very interesting event because of so many reasons. After COVID, this is the first time that the BRICS members, they are joining physically, and they have invited 40 head of states, and many of them will probably be joining, and lots of discussions going on with new memberships, BRICS' role in this global situation and other things. So there are ongoing debates. In world order, there are so many changes are happening, especially after the war in Ukraine, and also the global economic crisis that we are facing. So in this background, we thought that this is interesting to have a discussion, especially immediate before the BRICS summit, to understand the course of actions that might be taken in this summit, and specifically focus on Bangladesh's aspiration to become a member in BRICS. So we'll try to focus and analyze the current economic, political, and social dynamics concerning BRICS through this colloquium. And we'll also try to find out issues, challenges, and risks and benefits of joining BRICS by Bangladesh as a member. Another objective of the colloquium is to identify the potential avenues of cooperation as well as inhibiting factors of Bangladesh in joining BRICS. And finally, suggesting some realistic and pragmatic ways for Bangladesh to take the process of joining BRICS to a fruitful outcome. We have a very knowledgeable and experienced panelists today within us. 3 of them have joined physically in this room, and one of the panelists joined online. We have with us Professor Syed Mansoub Morshed, International Institute of Social Studies, Erasmus University, The Hague, Netherlands. We have with us Professor Niaz Asadullah. He has joined online. Honorary Professorial Fellow, Department of Economics, North-South University. And also we have Dr. Lailufar Yasmin, Professor and Chairman, Department of International Relations, University of Dhaka. And finally with us, Professor Shahidul Haq, the professor from South Asian Institute of Policy and Governance of North-South University. I will give a brief introduction also about their profile before I invite each of them. Just let you know the modality. We will have few rounds of questions to the panelists at the beginning, and each panelist, you will get 5 to 6 minutes time to answer those questions in each round. And I hope that in the first 2 rounds, we'll hear from the panelists, and then I will go to the participants who are joining here physically and also online, and then you can ask questions or give your comments. For our online participants, please use your chat box to give your comments or questions. Our research associates, they will be compiling those questions, and then we will be placing those to the our panelists. So let's start the first round of the questions to the panelists. And in the first round, I will invite Professor Shahidul Haq in the beginning. Let me introduce him also a little bit elaborate manner. Professor Haq is currently serves as a professor of SIPG, and also he occupies the ICCR Bangabandhu chair at the University of Delhi, India. He is a senior advisor on migration and humanitarian policy of IOM Dhaka. Professor Haq served as a foreign secretary of Bangladesh and has led the Bangladesh delegation to the negotiation with Myanmar associated with Rohingya issues. He has focused on research areas such as the Rohingya issue, migration, climate change, human trafficking, the global economy, and geopolitics. So, Professor Haq, my first question to you is how the idea of BRICS was formulated and how has it evolved in the last 1 decade? 5 to 6 minutes, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to open the floor. What I'll do, I'll use a PowerPoint just to give a kind of a quick background. Not that I will be using all the slides. What I'll do, I'll skip through, but these will be available for you to read it. So I've been asked to look at Genesis, its parameters, and a little bit of a challenge. But I'll sort of come back once again. Yeah. Good. Before we do that, this morning I was sort of reflecting as to how to start, and I thought we are into 2022, which is very different than when the whole idea was conceived in a boardroom in London. So let's see how different the world is today, and it's very interesting that how quickly within almost 10 years things radically transformed. The world in 2001, some of us were still in the business of international relations and politics. The world was more or less a unipolar world led by United States. There was overwhelming importance of neoliberal global order. That was the time when we were negotiating the SDGs. So there was a big upbeat, both in the global sense and the regional sense, that something substantive happening, and we have been able to avoid war for quite a bit of time. But there was also a kind of an understanding that there's a fundamental shift taking place, and that was the reason that Goldman Sachs went ahead looking at investment opportunities globally, that the center of business and economy was shifting from the west to the east. So that was the background. But UN still was seen as a very functional, trying to help developing countries, still relevant. We moved to the 2022. Things is absolutely different. We are often feel that we're between two orders. One is quickly breaking down, and the other one, we don't know how that looks like. So that's one. The other one is that people are also saying that we have possibly passed the post-Cold War. So the things that normally happens in a Cold War situation is no longer there, but we don't know what is coming. And we also see a battle. I deliberately use the word battle between the US-led Western world and the China-centric East. So that's something you'll see a reflection in the BRICS. So we are in a very volatile, uncertain world. I'll go fast. It was in 2001, as I said, in London, the Goldman Sachs team, asset management team, was looking at where they will get maximum value out of their investment. So that it's a very, the BRICS is very unique in terms of its birth, because it was not born in Foreign Office. It was not born in the Prime Minister's office. But the idea was born in a boardroom. So that's that was the scene, and the gentleman who is still around, Jim O'Neill, who said that some of the BRIC, so South Africa wasn't there, will be making more sense in terms of investment and return than some of the G7 countries. So at that time it was a big news that Goldman Sachs is coming out with a new set of countries which has much more potential in terms of business return. They were not looking at geopolitics. If you look at the report, you will not see geopolitics. So that was the economics of BRICS. If you look at today, partly he was true and partly he wasn't in terms of forecasting. Partly he was true because these 5 countries together still occupies a major position in terms of economics. 24% of the GDP, 1/3 in terms of PPP. So it's big, 40% of the population. In fact, it is, if you take India, China, and Russia, you will see that as if most of the people are located in these 3 countries. So that's a huge force. And then comes the landmass, which is very important in the Indo-Pacific and also a huge landmark. I'm trying to sort of squeeze something which you haven't thought of. So in terms of politics, what happened is that the idea came out and immediately Russia, China, India, and to some extent Brazil picked up the idea. Now, Russia took the lead in creating what you call a boardroom paper into a real interstate collaboration. It happened because that was the time when there's a unipolar world, with 1989. And America seems to be leading in every sense. Certainly, others were not very comfortable with it. And also, China and Russia seems to be having a rapprochement after a long kind of a battle, which was not ideological in nature, but strategic. So that two combined, the BRICS came around. And if there are questions, I'll share about who at that time felt how about the BRICS. Now, I will go quickly. I'll not go into the objective because other colleagues will be touching it. What is the fundamental characteristics that I pick up from the BRICS? BRICS is an association. I will not call it an organization, an association, a platform of countries who are important in terms of economy, but they are all non-Western. So that chemistry we need to understand. And this is perhaps the only organization of that size and relevance which has not included as yet any Western, in true sense, country. So that's very unique. There are other characteristics. Those who are interested, they can look at my PowerPoint. This BRICS also, time to time, plays a very critical role, both in the UN, in the Security Council, and even in the G20. Because in the G20, we know there are 20 countries. One big group is the G7 club, and then the rest. Within the rest, we see sometimes BRICS, even before, not much now, because of some of the tensions that emerged within the BRIC or BRICS. We see that emerging. So I will skip all the statistics because I know my other colleagues would be looking at it. So what is the achievement? And I leave it to the panelists who will focus on the bank. I think the biggest kind of an achievement of BRICS is formation of the new development bank and some of the other issues where, in fact, President Putin had a big thrust and a stake, and it has emerged as an alternative source of financing in the world, and Bangladesh has bought shares of the bank and is a member. So that's something just to flag. Sorry. This could be a game changer because through this bank, the BRICS countries are trying to give a new model for development to the world. I'll finish it. I'm just in the so that's something new. Instead of taking a political ideological path, the BRICS countries are taking an economic ideological path to show rest of the world that there are other models of development, not that you have to always look for the new liberal ideology. So that's very important, and that's the underlying tension that it creates into it. Let me come back to the challenge for BRIC, and I'll finish with it. The drawing convergence between the 5 countries, which wasn't that apparent earlier, but now drawing the convergence because of the geopolitics is a critical aspect of the future of South. And also keeping BRICS relevant to the global South. Because if there's too much of a tension within the organization, then the developing countries get a little nervous, although there are 40 countries joining, but most of them are extremely nervous as to which side in the BRICS they will end up in. So that's one. The other one is the whole issue of BRIC currency. there's a recent interview came out from Mr. O'Neill, and he was asked that, do you think that BRICS currency would be a game changer? And he said, no, it's a ridiculous idea, to quote him, to have a BRICS currency where most of the other are not making much of the headway. I think I've come. Now, for some, I think it is also a Bandung experience of 1955, when the world was polarized and most of the country didn't know which way to go. They went for a Bandung conference, and the non-aligned movement took off. Where the BRICS eventually would be able to give a Bandung experience to some of the developing countries, or seem to be so. We'll have to wait and see. I'll just end with this. O'Neill, after coming out of the Golden Sack, wrote a book, a very interesting book for those who are interested, called Global Growth Map. And in this, he also identified what is known as the new 11, next 11, including Bangladesh. He said, fine, we have emerging market, but we have also another group of emerging market, which could also be a good investment opportunity. He was looking at all through investment. He was not looking at geopolitics the way it has evolved eventually. So you see Bangladesh there. And so naturally, Bangladesh was in the focus.
Thank you, Professor Shahidullah. We'll come back to you again in the next round. Now we are going to Professor Syed Mansub Morshed. Let me also give a brief introduction of him. Professor Morshed currently serves as a professor of economics of peace and conflict at the International Institute of Social Studies, ISS, Erasmus University in the Netherlands. His specialization encompasses the economics of conflict, resource abundance, aid conditionality, political economy, macroeconomics, and international economics. He is the esteemed author of 10 books and over 170 referred journal papers and book chapters. His comprehensive understanding of complex economic issues related to peace and conflict mark him as a leading figure in this discipline, shaping both academic thought and practical applications in economics. Professor Morshed, my question to you would be, do you think the non-Western model of economic development, which is sometimes also termed as a Beijing consensus in comparison to the Washington consensus, would have traction in the future, especially in developing countries? 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you. First of all, let me thank the organizers for inviting me to this particular talk today. It's a great pleasure for me, and it's my first visit to the North-South University. I hope not the last, but going into the question itself, I mean, when we think of alternative models of growth and development, we associate traditionally that with as the difference between the capitalist mode and the socialist mode. And then later on, we usually associate that with, nowadays, as the question suggests, we associate that with the shall we say, the Western US-led mode and the Chinese mode. Actually, it's a question of degree. The modes are rather similar. I would, in my humble opinion, suggest that the two alternative modes are what I describe as the plutocratic mode versus the social contract or social developmental mode. So I am reminded of a book which has this two-word title. The two words are capitalism alone. So that book, the author of that book, a certain Branko Milanovic, who happens to be quite well known to me as a friend and colleague, suggested that there is capitalism and the old socialist modes of economic governance or development are gone. So you just have capitalism left. And there's a difference between what he describes as the Chinese mode and the American or the US mode. I'm afraid I disagree because there's a great deal of overlap. And he says what distinguishes the two, and I'm happy to see there are a lot of students in the audience, is the following. The Chinese mode has a greater role of the state, so that the state, relatively speaking, can interfere with the market system and impose its own will. Now, this is just a matter of degree because you can think of examples of this as well as counterexamples. There are instances where, for example, at the present moment, the United States government is imposing sanctions and controls over technology transfer, which could benefit, as it were, the technological know-how in China. So it's not that, previously also during the Cold War, there were lots and lots of other sanctions and controls over the same thing, technology transfer and leaks to the Soviet bloc. But what is more interesting in the world at the moment is the single most global economic problem. And that problem is one which has been described best by a French economist called Piketty, Thomas Piketty, as, in one word, inequality, the extreme growth of inequality. And that has, in many ways, replaced the earlier emphasis that we had simply on growth as well as employment or unemployment. So inequality is the big issue. And the driver of inequality is basically the rate of return on capital in exceeding the growth rate of the economy. So for the students, let me just repeat that again. Inequality is driven by financialization and the fact the profit rate on capital far exceeds the growth rate of the economy. Okay? So that is the biggest problem, and both the Beijing-centered and the Washington-centered modes do not address that. Rather, we are moving towards a dystopic world which is plutocratic. For those of you who don't know, this plutocratic is derived from a Greek word called plutos, which means wealth or money. So it means government for the rich, by the rich, and of the rich. And in this instance, both models are very similar because of the growth in inequality. Now, what would be the role of BRICS in all of this? Not much. BRICS seems to me, from the earlier presentation, to be a list of countries outside the Western world in terms of their economic size. Okay, so you add the 11, you're basically getting the 11 largest, the 6 or the 5, plus the 11 largest non-Western economies. So that's what it is. I mean, and in policy circles, BRICS was mentioned as, providing a role during the financial crisis. And I'll just end there. BRICS' role as a development bank is not just something Goldman Sachs has dreamt of for the benefit of developing countries, and not by any means. Goldman Sachs is there to make huge profits. Going back to the earlier point I made, the rate of return on capital exceeding the rate of return growth. So what we have in the world at the moment is huge capital surpluses. There's money sloshing around without proper investment opportunities. So Mr. Goldman Sachs saw a further opportunity to make profits through a bank which would act like a development bank, not private sector banks, but like a development bank to exploit opportunities for a high rate of return on investment. The development results are controversial. I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Professor Morshad, and you brought a very interesting dimension that, as Professor Shahidul Haq was identifying, that BRICS as a kind of a Western versus non-Western, but also at the same time, it's true that there is a non-Western capitalist bloc versus Western capitalist bloc. So the capitalism is there, and it's capitalism alone, and capitalism alone. And the problem with this capitalism, whether it's a Western capitalism or non-Western capitalism, is the inequality, and that
Yes,
inequality.
It's plutocratic versus the model we had after the Second World War. So even the United States was socialist in the 1950s because of a redistributive system which they adopted then. So,
And also,
so the United States and the Soviet Union were following the same model in the 1950s.
So it's
So
very
that was the
interesting to see that this extra capital that
Now it's
the Western world have, how it has been now spreading within the non-Western capitalistic world.
It's government for the rich, by the rich.
Great,
and of the
absolutely.
rich.
So it will be an interesting discussion that how BRICS can be even as a dream that want to be an alternative or kind of economic world order or political world order, at the same time following the capitalistic mode of economy or the same kind of the capital theories and the following principles. I'll come back to you again, and now I go to Professor Niyaz Asadullah. Professor Niyaz is with us online. Let me give a brief introduction of him. Professor Niyaz is currently serving as an honorary professorial fellow in the Department of Economics at North-South University. He previously taught at the University of Malaya and Reading University, UK, and held visiting positions at universities including Harvard, Oxford, and Manchester. He specializes in development economics, labor economics, gender inequality, and education, with a particular focus on South and Southeast Asia. With over 50 journal articles published in economics and development studies and appearances in international media outlets like Al Jazeera and BBC World Service, Professor Asadullah's contributions to academia, research, and policy have made a significant impact in his field. So, Professor Niyaz Asadullah, my first question to you would be, how can Bangladesh be benefited economically by joining BRICS, and do you think this is the right choice at the right moment? I also have, okay, I will come to that with that question in the second round. So this is for you, over to you, sir.
Thank you very much for the question, and also thank you to North-South University for inviting me to this very important and timely forum. So your question, as I see it, has two parts. So how can Bangladesh benefit economically by joining BRICS? And the second part is about the timeliness of the choice. So I will answer in that order. So first thing first, the benefit of joining BRICS. Now, so Bangladesh is currently positioned as a nation that aspires to grow, become high-income nation by 2041 by leveraging trade as an engine of transforming the economy, right? So for us, given our export orientation, any opportunity, including BRICS, that improves this prospect and reinforces this model that we have envisioned in our plan document is a good idea. Now, there is another reason why this is a good idea, because if we look at official data on trade GDP share, it has been declining at an alarming rate for the last 1 decade. Export as a share of GDP has fell, from 17% in 2013 to 7%. So again, multilateral platforms and agreements like BRIC that can increase access to new technology, that can improve access to overseas markets that are rapidly growing and that have large domestic markets, and also opportunities that reduce trade cost. Most importantly, with minimum conditionalities, with benefit Bangladesh, right? So in that sense, BRICS tick many boxes. So huge potential, since the 6 members are at different stages of economic and technological development. So there are huge gains from trade in that sense. But we also have to be realistic about economic promise. I say this because BRICS is not yet a free trade bloc. And lately, China is talking about it, advocating the idea, but it's not there yet, right? So membership gains will be dictated by two factors. First is the future growth prospect of BRICS as a whole, and the second is the economic distance between the BRIC member countries and new member states that aspire to join BRICS. So on the first point, the golden era of BRICS, i.e. investment intensive catch-up growth phase, is probably over. It was before the pandemic that China dominated in terms of economic growth, reaching double-digit peak in 2007, 14% GDP growth rate. Now, make no mistake, China is still on a path to growth. It is projected to grow at a respectable rate and will dominate BRIC bloc. But the greater promise in terms of higher growth is India. So the prospect for catch-up growth phase is about India. Now, for what does it mean for prospective member country like Bangladesh? Well, we have to therefore, reap the benefit through trade with this nation, but that is contingent on our distance in terms of economic complexity. So there are two ways, therefore, to think about it. Sorry, was there a question for me?
No, please carry on.
Okay. So the economic complexity refers to what we produce, how we produce, versus what is happening in China in terms of industrial production, its manufacturing base, and what is happening to India in terms of technological intensity of its production and so forth. So therefore, there are again two ways to think about decisions to join BRICS and the timing. First is the economics, another one is the politics. So if purely thinking in terms of economic gains, we are definitely ready in terms of our long-term developmental aspirations, in terms of our plan documents, in terms of our growth strategy, but we are not fully ready in terms of the structure of our economy and pattern of industrialization. Other emerging Asian non-BRICS economies have been much more successful in strengthening their ties with BRIC countries despite being non-members. This is a very important point. And the reason why it has happened is because these nations are very similar to the leading BRIC nation in terms of economic complexity index. So think of China, for example, which is really a leader now in terms of economic complexity index, right? So again, if you were to think of one non-BRIC member country that has made such forward linkages with China, think of the country that I'm currently based in, which is Malaysia. So what has happened between Malaysia and China over the last 2 decades is, I think, offers huge lesson for Bangladesh. These countries trade in similar products, very important, right? So when they import, export from each other, these are products very intensive in technology, such as integrated circuits, office machine parts, computers. So it's not just China exporting this to Malaysia. Malaysia's export to China is also dominated by integrated circuits. And the reason is the two countries have very similar rank in terms of the complexity of their economy, right? So therefore, despite being a non-BRIC member, Malaysia has seen explosive bilateral trade, not just with China, but also with India, another major BRIC player. Now, this is where Bangladesh has to think carefully because we are far behind in terms of our economic readiness. If we are to take lesson from Malaysia in terms of how they prepared their economy in terms of complexity, right? So again, and if you were to think it specifically in terms of data, the closest BRIC member for us in terms of economic complexity index is India, which is ranked 41. Bangladesh is ranked 101. But even then, so compared to China, we should have more trade with India, but even then it's the opposite. It's huge trade deficit. And if you consider our trade with India, it is intensive in non-technology related products. So therefore, we have to sort of rethink about the question, and there are other reasons, however, to take the proposition of joining BRICS very seriously. And that one isn't about economics, it's about geopolitics. And that's where I can see that there is good reason to join BRICS, and the time is now.
Okay.
And the question is why? So very briefly, so Bangladesh have done very well in maintaining a very balanced relationship with major BRIC nations, and managing the great power rivalry between China and the US. And in that sense, BRIC would be a pragmatic foreign policy strategy, because we also aspire to become an emerging middle power. Now, there is another very important aspect, which is this resurgence of regionalism, the geopolitical.
We'll come at later on. Is it okay?
Okay.
That one we will come back. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for putting a very important points here. And as you started with that, BRICS not still a free trade blocks, and golden era of BRICS is probably over, and then the economics versus politics. So, and then definitely we will see that how politics is playing a role in making this decision of joining or not joining. So I'll come back to you again, and I now go to our last panelist in this round, Professor Layloufar Yasmin. And also I want to give a brief introduction of her. Professor Yasmin currently is serving as the chairperson of the Department of International Relations of University of Dhaka. Her expertise encompasses a wide array of subjects in international relations, including Bangladesh's politics, economy and foreign policy, South Asian affairs, China's rise, maritime security and Indo-Pacific region, and women's participation in UN peacekeeping. Her insights in research provide valuable perspective on contemporary challenges, and her impact as a scholar resonates both regionally and globally. Professor Yasmin, my first question to you would be, do you think BRICS will soon open its door to interstate countries for membership? And why we are asking this question? Because there are some sense of understanding that there is a tension between India and China within BRICS in relation to new membership. So how do you look into this? I just add one more point that we have seen, even though that's not comparable, that how SAARC has become dysfunctional because there was a tension between India and Pakistan. But they are neighboring countries, but this is a other bigger thing. So how do you see this internal tension between the big powers within BRICS?
Thank you. Tawfiq Bhai, is always a pleasure and an honor being, invited to come here. And as we're speaking before that, how North-South and the entire building and everything has changed since the last time I taught here, and actually the first time I taught here. Back in 2003. So yes, it is quite a difficult question, because I'm asked to predict something, right? So prediction in international relations is a no-no, that we don't predict things, because today something is happening, tomorrow it can entirely change because Corona is that kind of sort of an event that we couldn't predict, right? And it changed international politics in so many ways, and our way of looking at things also changed. And what we have seen, rather, increasing diplomatic engagement, a shaky world order, unstable world order, and the question that people always ask, whether there are two competing international orders, very skillfully pointed out that international orders or economic orders is basically driven by capitalist sort of ideas, and it is in the interest of China to make this international order sustain, especially the economic part of it. So why we are now talking about BRICS sort of BRICS engagement with newer countries? Three particular drivers that came to the mind of policymakers, especially China and Russia. If you read yesterday, there was an article in Foreign Policy which talked about how China and Russia, they want this expansion. However, as also before Professor 𝐏𝐢𝐯𝐬 mentioned, that how there is a fundamental difference between China and India that must be overcome at first before thinking of admission of new members or expansion of BRICS. So what are the three particular drivers for which BRICS might be thinking, or there has been sort of kind of euphoria over taking new membership in BRICS. First of all, Global South, and the term, you would see that Global South has become very popular these days. These countries used to be called as non-aligned countries during the time of the Cold War. Number of scholars often try to say that we have entered into a new era of rivalry, a new era of Cold War between China and United States of America. That is fundamentally wrong, because here there is no battle over ideology, there is no export of ideology, but it is in the interest of the both countries to sustain this capitalist global order. So there is a fundamental difference between the Cold War that happened between the United States and Soviet Union and what is happening between China and America right now. So the term Global South actually talks about a number of countries who are interested to show that they take interest in whatever America is saying, the West is saying, or China is saying. So therefore, this Global South, they don't call themselves non-aligned because there might be a misunderstood, and it can be equated with the politics of 20th century, but politics in 21st century is very much different. So these members of Global South, they want to have a different kind of platform which is not dominated or which is not controlled by the Western countries. 12%, as Kishore Mahbubani very famously pointed out, that 12% of the population of the world cannot determine the fate of the rest of the world. So that's simple fact. So another fact, if you see global statistics provided yesterday, that what if we had just 100 people in the world? So if we had only 100 people on Earth, 18 would be from India, 18 would be from China, 4 would be from USA, 3 would be from Indonesia, 3 from Pakistan, Nigeria, Brazil, 2 from Bangladesh. And we often forget the strength of the Global South, and then 2 from Russia, 2 from Japan, 2 from Mexico, and the rest 40 would be from the rest of the world. So we often forget the strength that Global South possesses. As very rightfully pointed out by Professor Shahidul Haque before, that it was something that BRICS was something that did not form out of diplomatic compulsion, choices, discussion of these 4 countries. Rather, it again shows how non-Western countries, we forget to, or we hesitate to seize the moment, that these countries were far ahead in terms of economic strength and how their markets were expanding. This was identified once again by someone sitting far away from these countries. So here we forget to seize the moment. So Global South, the first determinant, Global South wants to seize the moment, something that I write about Bangladesh a lot, that we need to seize the moment. Second is the return of President Lula in Brazil. So he made sure that Brazil takes a different kind of politics, and Brazil's fundamental commitment to Africa, to Global South, that can be manifested in the forms of BRICS. And third, the sanction against Russia and the economic implication of these on the global southern countries who do not have the rule-making, agenda-setting capacity, but they are suffering due to agenda-setting, rule-making of certain countries. So these 3 were the particular drivers. And then another issue is that we all know the particular statistics that 42% of the world population live in these 5 countries, 26% of iron and steel deposited in these 5 countries, 40% of corn is produced in these 5 countries, 46% of wheat this is produced in these 5 countries. So what happens if some of the other countries join in BRICS coalition? If Saudi Arabia joins in BRICS, we'd see 42% of the world's oil production will be in BRICS, right? I mean, it will be an expanded name, of course, but 42% of the oil will be produced from this particular coalition. What if Turkey, Egypt, Iran, and Saudi Arabia together join? 40% of the world's total GDP would belong to this group. 60% of the world's consumer market would belong to this particular group. So we can see the strength that BRICS will come up with. But the question is that whether these countries, whether BRICS will expand. So the latest, again, prediction, I might be wrong, like 40 minutes later after we finish this conference, but the latest sort of discussion goes on by saying that yes, is the fundamental difference between India and China is that they don't want a new member right now. Why? I'll just finish in a minute. So the global outlook, if you see the global politics, Russia and China holds a huge sort of leverage in sort of aligning their policies, and they have certain political interests vis-a-vis non-Western countries. Then again, there's a number of countries, global south, who follow different policies. For example, active neutrality in terms of their foreign policy with regard to the West and other countries. Then there is another way we can sort of paraphrase this: passive neutrality or active engagement in terms of issue-based policies with other countries. Then another policy followed is active engagement. For example, a number of Southeast Asian countries, they have taken up China +1 foreign policy outlook. Then again, another sort of way that global southern countries are trying to engage during the period of non-alignment, it was equidistance from both the superpowers. I like to call it rather equi-connection with both.
Can you come those in the second
Yeah,
round?
we'll coming. So global outlook, why, so these are some of the global southern countries are following in their foreign policy. On the other extreme is America and the West in general, and that is why we can see that sort of that regional. India belongs to both blocs, with the West as well as with Russia and China when it comes to Ukraine policy, when it comes to a number of policies. Therefore, it's very difficult for us to predict whether this will expand immediately in the coming conferences, but there is a possibility that due to strategic reasons, China and India may converge in taking a few members. Just one other point that we often did not notice, that when we are talking about BRICS having 27% of world's geographic area, only China and India share contiguous sort of territorial connection. If Bangladesh joins, just think about the contiguousness of BRICS membership. So there's a huge implication of taking other countries. So when I was talking about what happens if Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Egypt, Iran, South join in BRICS, so what happens when Bangladesh joins? There's a huge contiguous area. We often forget to connect this. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Ali, for very important points. And even though there are lots of ifs and buts, but but that's the reason that we are trying to understand. But it is very clear that it's not an easy venture, that expansion of BRICS, because it will have a very, very challenging kind of a situation because of role of India, and probably Brazil will also be trying to be more neutral, not seeing as itself as an anti-US kind of a force. But China and Russia's interest within BRICS will be probably more making it as a political bloc in terms of creating a new world order, or kind of the order in politics and economics. So we are now going to the second round to the panelists, but this time we'll have to cut the time short because we lost quite a good number of time in the first round. So I just can give 3 minutes time in the second round. And then we'll be more interested to listen from the audience, our faculty, students, and also participants, journalists who have joined online. So first I go back again to the same order to Professor Shahidul Haq. My second question to you would be, what are the major geopolitical challenges for Bangladesh in terms of joining BRICS? And will it be a major shift in our foreign policy? So Professor Shahid, 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. Bangladesh, because of its strategic location, inherits certain geopolitical challenges. Number one. Number two, also something to do with its birth. It is often said that Bangladesh was born out of a geopolitics and out of Cold War. When Cold War was in the peak, Bangladesh was born. And we also see that after our emergence, after a struggle, we also got into a politics or a geopolitics which wasn't very easy to navigate, but we did with our father of the nation, Bangabandhu's friendship with all and malice towards none, but it's very interesting. And I've recently sort of spelled it out. How do you navigate geopolitics rather than identifying geopolitics? Is that it was a policy, but it was leaning towards a particular bloc, which is the Soviet bloc, especially as long as Bangabandhu was around. So that's very interesting. So what it actually suggests is that you can have a friendship with all and malice towards none, or as Professor Laylofer has said, that, sort of equidistance, which still kind of a mystic in international relations, what it means to be equidistant from two powers by a country, Bangladesh. So, but you can subtly tilt as long as you can come back to a balance. And the best example that we often now say that is Sri Lanka, which tilted but could not come back to the balance by the time it realized that it has tilted and the balance cannot be retained. It was already facing huge problem and is continuing to do so. So that's the other challenge of a tilt. So having said this, if you take that frame of policy making and implementation by Bangladesh, what are the geopolitical challenges for Bangladesh? I'll identify three. One is that Bangladesh is still an LDC country. Often we forget, but that's what it is. And we are going through a transformation, which we'll see how it takes shape in 2026, and how we survive without having the privileges that we get as an LDC. So that's on the trade and economy and investment side. Militarily, we are still, I think, very nascent. So that's the other limitations that we have. And the third is that, and third is the very important, and that's where the geopolitical challenges emerges. I see Bangladesh in the center of Bay of Bengal. Often we do not realize how important Bangladesh physically is in the Bay. And that's where the difficulties, the geopolitical challenges that Bangladesh faces. How far Bangladesh should be able to continue to remain balanced, quote unquote, equidistance, or even neutral, although I do not subscribe to the whole idea of neutrality in foreign policy, which doesn't exist actually, even for Switzerland now. So that would be the main challenge. And Bangladesh joining the BRICS and others joining the BRICS has a different connotation. And Professor Asadullah has rightly pointed out, it is more geopolitics than geoeconomics for Bangladesh. So if it is more geopolitics, then it is the strategic location, as Professor Laylofer has rightly pointed out, that not only in terms of land mass, which is much larger than 40%, but also the population. India, closely followed by China, and then Russia, and then Bangladesh. So it looks like the whole world population is folded into this particular land, which is a huge implication, both in terms of its potentials, its productivity, but also in terms of risk. You have to keep this huge population satisfied, protected from all sense. So that's the geopolitics. I think for Bangladesh, geopolitics is continue to keep its navigation correct and serve and protect its people. It was born out of Cold War. I hope it will not become a subject of Cold War with this island. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Shahid. And we'll come back to Professor Murshid again. Even though that discussion has been already covered, that I had the question in my mind that how the BRICS has been converged, the interest of the members after 12 years of emergence as a platform of economic cooperation. But I also want to put another question with it, that Bangladesh as a non-BRICS member now, its relation trade with the BRICS country, and comparing with the non-BRICS country, if you can also make a comparison, and where should we focus more? So yeah, 3 minutes, sir, again.
Not at all. Thank you. If you look at the structure of BRICS, I mean, I always keep wondering, what is BRICS about? What does it do? I mean, we look at another body called the G7. Now, the G7 has, formerly the G3, has had a very clear policy objective, and that was to coordinate exchange rates between the dollar, the Deutschmark, now the euro, and the Japanese yen, which was crucial to the macroeconomic stability and the smooth functioning of international trade. We perhaps as a rider, I could add that the joker in the pack was the Chinese exchange rate, and it was artificially engineered to be, the real exchange rate was artificially engineered to be very competitive vis-a-vis these other currencies. So even if the nominal exchange rate China was compelled or felt obliged to appreciate the renminbi, it could always adjust in terms of wage costs and other costs of production to maintain market share. Okay, I mean, we look at BRICS, we have an economy like China, which is the main manufacturing hub of the world. In fact, most of the world's manufacturing takes place in East Asia and one South Asian country, namely Bangladesh. So Bangladesh is very much part of the East Asian bloc in that respect. Then we have India. Now, India's position in the global economy is changing, as being pointed out, but it is mainly an exporter of high value-added services, unlike China. Russia doesn't do anything of the sort. It's a resource-based economy. In other words, its exports are minerals. And there's huge kleptocracy associated with that, because minerals are the most susceptible and the most accessible in terms of actually siphoning off the rents. And then we have Brazil. Well, Brazil is a regional economic power via Mercosur. And then we have South Africa, which is also a regional economic power. It's a mixed economy like Brazil, a combination of commodities and manufacturing, but trading mainly in the regional areas. But the market, the large market in the world, still remains the United States. And as far as countries of the world, particularly the manufacturing exporters, but even the resource-based exporters, the exporters of minerals and fuels, if they consider the United States, it's mainly the manufacturing and high value-added service economies. If the United States is the major market, and if the United States' trade deficit is the major source of and the major engine of growth, I can't think of an alternative currency or alternative mode. So really, I mean, BRICS is basically, it's the pecking order of the larger non-Western developing countries. So where is the policy coordination? Where is the convergence of issues there? And of course, as has been pointed out, and I would like to emphasize this, geoeconomics is still raising its head. And I mean, I hesitate to tread into the area of international politics, but we have this notion of the liberal peace into which I work. Trade is the major driver of peace between countries. And when you have geoeconomics and the fragmentation, particularly on strategic grounds of trade, in terms of technology transfer, is also safeguarding sources of materials to produce what is required in these things in our smartphones and computers and so on. With that move, because countries, both China and the United States, feel insecure and want to reserve enough rare earth materials and other materials and restrict, trade with each other, particularly the United States, as during the Cold War, then geoeconomics, although that is something which has a million definitions, thousands of definitions in textbooks and in internet sources, is raising its head. So, I mean, I really don't know what BRICS is about. What is it? What is its function, apart from, being a list of the largest 16 developed or 5 developing economies or emerging economies?
Thank you. Very interesting point to seeing the other perspectives. And this challenge is definitely they're very visible. Probably in the global south, the expectation from the people and policymakers are one thing and the realities are different. And there comes to the next question to Professor Niaz Asadullah, that there are lots of discussion about alternative currency, BRICS currency, and all these things, or introducing a common currency for global south. So what do you think is potential to shape an economic landscape challenging the American dominance in the international financial system? Again, 3 minutes, sir.
Thank you. So far as viability is concerned from an economic point of view, I can think of 3 factors. The first is deepening of existing trade relationship. If you think about it, demand for a common currency is related to trade pattern. Now, because BRIC nations today trade more than before among themselves, it kind of makes sense to adopt a common currency or even a currency union for further intensifying cross-border trade, because it would reduce cost of trade at the intra-regional level. But there is another reason for this. China has now displaced US as the main trade partner for several trade-oriented major southern economies, including Japan. So therefore, this is a very important development. So the second aspect relating to viability is that beyond trade relations, it is also about monetary cooperation or some kind of integration of behavior of central banks among member countries in terms of monetary policies. And existing evidence, academic evidence suggests that there has been progress in this aspect. The third aspect related to viability is political economy. So again, is it time now for developing an alternative to US dollar? Answer is yes, given the strong support from the global south and the resentment against IMF and World Bank, which my fellow panelists have pointed out is a reflection of the power imbalance that these institutions are seen as institutions for the rich countries by the rich countries in the global north. So therefore, the resurgence in regionalism and more demand for South-South economic collaboration means that a common currency is likely to be politically viable. But now turning to your second part of the question, whether it is going to change the existing landscape, the prospect of de-dollarization, in my opinion, answer is, well, we are unlikely to see a complete de-dollarization, at least for 2 reasons. One is that BRIC nations still lack a fully developed financial market. And the second one, which is more important, is that even if, for example, Chinese renminbi is to become the reserve currency, China has to either move to open capital account system, which is it currently not, or China has to back it with dollar reserves anyway. So therefore, so far as fundamentally altering the existing landscape, challenging the American dominance, it will take a while. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we come to our last panelist with the question that Professor Lailufat, that again coming to Bangladesh discussion, that what is the motive behind Bangladesh's recent interest behind this decision to join BRICS? And as we can understand that, is it politics or is it economy? What do you think?
Thank you. The word motive first, it sounds like very negative in mind. It's not rather motive, rather
motivation.
Motivation, yes.
Okay, let's see. I just have a supplementary question also. And then what would be the kind of a response to the Western world of this kind of, if this is a geopolitical
Yeah.
decision? So
Yeah.
that
Yeah,
also.
yeah.
3 minutes.
So altogether, what's the goals and objectives that Bangladesh plans to achieve by joining here, and how it is being viewed by the rest of the world, right? So one thing we often forget, as Professor 𝐁𝐚𝐧𝐬 pointed out, that Bangladesh is sitting at the mouth of the Bay of Bengal. It's often said as a butterfly formation, because Bangladesh is a getaway to the landlocked part of India. Northeast India shares only 2% of its connection with the mainland India. And then there is Nepal, there is Bhutan, and not only that, by connecting with Myanmar, it can go to easily can go to Southeast Asian countries. So this geopolitical significance is often very underrated. Bangladesh is, if you see the literature published in 80s and 90s, you would see Bangladesh is called as a victim of geography. So from that, Bangladesh is going through a very transformative phase, where Bangladesh is the second largest economy now in South Asia, as well as so many areas that are happening often go unnoticed, because often Bangladesh is seen as, from economic point of view, as an RMG-led country, a country which has only RMG and manpower export. But why then people forget to ask why during the entire COVID period, how Bangladeshis who are living outside of Dhaka, how did they survive? So we do not have this understanding, we do not have this proper study about how rural Bangladeshis are surviving, coping with crisis. So many times in 1976, Farland, the famous scholar, pointed out Bangladesh as a test case of development, that if Bangladesh without any physical resources can develop, all the other countries of the world can do. But none other countries develop the way Bangladesh did. So what are the, and that is why perhaps we often see the word, see the phrase Bangladesh surprise, Bangladesh paradox, etc., etc. But those cannot be seen from economic point of view. But economic and social policies should be tied together. So Bangladesh is going through a transformation, which often Bangladesh is in the taking agenda setting role, especially issues concerning Bangladesh's foreign policy objectives. For example, on Rohingya issue, Bangladesh has taken a very bold step in framing of UN resolution against Myanmar. Wherever the word and concern about Rohingyas were not mentioned, Bangladesh simply said, we are not going to be a party to this, we are going to abstain. And then Bangladesh was a party to rephrasing and bringing new UNGA resolutions. So these are some of the things we forget. And Bangladesh's constitutional mandate says that Bangladesh is going, I differ a little bit with Sir in this respect, that neutrality, and often it is said a friend to all is a friend to none. But we forget that a friend to all can also be very carefully calculated friend to all. So the word equidistance, in fact, what I could not mention in that context, that I would rather say that instead of equidistance, which reflect a foreign policy of 20th century, it should be equiconnection. As we can see in case of Bangladesh, how for example, in terms of FDI, US is the central contributor. US provided in January to June 2022 period 19.2% of total FDI. China provided 13.5%, the second FDI contributor. UK 11.2%, Singapore 8.7%, as Bangladesh is belonging to the East Asian economy. So we can already see Southeast Asian countries are becoming interested about Bangladesh's.
I just have just a supplementary question. If that is the case, so why Bangladesh is not trying to join in RCEP? Why Bangladesh is not talking about joining Indo-Pacific Economic Forum? Because those are the countries where our economy belongs. So it doesn't make sense.
Let me come there. It does make sense, because Indo-Pacific Economic Outlook has a political connotation to it. Bangladesh has joined BRI, but not in the Pacific Outlook. So whether Bangladesh is going to be compelled to go through certain tick boxes, that's not in Bangladesh's interest. So in the Pacific Economic Outlook has a number of conditionalities, just as much as World Bank or IMF has. We are forgetting those conditionalities.
So don't get me misunderstood. I'm not in favoring of joining this book. I'm just raising a question so that it can be understood from our students' point of view. But then the question will also be raised, if if BRICS is becoming gradually more like a geopolitical bloc rather than a developmental economic bloc. So is it a right decision also to, in this right time, again, the right decision in the right time?
Yes, from geopolitical perspective, I would say this is a right choice because this is a forum that speaks on behalf of the global south about their interest. As I said, active neutrality or passive neutrality, active engagement or disengagement or equi-connection. We are keeping connection with America, with China, with Japan, with UK, with European Union. So this is in the interest of Bangladesh, and that is where the policy of neutrality comes for us. But the moment, look at Bangladesh's geographic position, we are no longer a victim of geography, but it cannot be overlooked that we are encircled by India and Myanmar. So this particular geopolitical or geographical situation is something that we must have to take into consideration. So it is against Bangladesh's interest when it talks about we are joining this bloc or that bloc. That from 1970s, Bangladesh did not do that. And even now, if you see the voting pattern on Ukraine issue in the UN General Assembly, Bangladesh never voted against Russia or never voted for Ukraine, but it voted for Ukrainian people. So we often forget, we often see it in a black and white.
But again, some people will be arguing that not voting against Russia means supporting Russia.
That's what I'm saying. It's no longer a Cold War politics of zero-sum game. There's a gray line, and that is something that's an extremely difficult rope to walk through. Bangladesh is trying to walk through properly. Of course, there are a lot of challenges. So I would not see voting in UNGA in a zero-sum game for sort of lens. You have to see the internal politics, backdoor diplomacy, and Bangladesh's interest there. So as I said, that it is going through a transformation, something that we often forget to realize ourselves. We see ourselves as a small country. It is no longer a small country. It is a middle power in South Asia. It is a country that can set its own agenda. And that is why it is in Bangladesh's interest to join forums that speaks, problems connecting to Bangladesh. From geographic sense, we can ask, and this I have done in several other occasions, why Rohingya issue is not internationalized. It's not an international problem, but Ukraine is an international problem. You see, so we can see that the lens of looking at issues is often Eurocentric or West-centric. So this is the mindset we have to come out of.
Thank you, Professor Lalufar. We are done with our formal round. So we have still 20 minutes time in our hand, 15 to 20. So now the floor is open. And also for our online participants, please ask your question or give your comments in the chat box if you have any specific kind of a thing. So any question? Okay, please introduce yourself and then.
So thank you. I'm 𝐁𝐚𝐬𝐶𝐬. I am a SIPG alumni, as well as I am working in British High Commission as political analyst. So my question to Professor Lalufar or Ambassador Shahidul can pull it out as well. As Bangladesh are locating in a vital geopolitical area. So we did not actually discuss about the security challenges of joining BRICS for Bangladesh. So do you see any of the security challenges or hurdles? Because India, you have mentioned, many of you have mentioned that India and China have long feud in this arena. Thank you.
We will take few questions and then come to the panelists again. So any other questions, comments? Yes.
Right. My name is 𝐏𝐢𝐯𝐬𝐴. I'm at the University of Bergen in Norway. I think we had very interesting discussions, very nice presentations. We talked about economy, we talked about wealth, we talked about landmass. But I think we missed or we didn't discuss about two aspects about Western domination. One is the technological development, which Professor Murshid came in the last, when his second presentation. So what makes the West powerful and dominated is because of technological development. And there's a long way for the BRICS to go in that way. The second aspect is the issue of legitimacy. To what extent BRICS is a legitimate institution, not in the global south, but also in the global north. To what extent the Western nations will accept BRICS as a kind of alternative or a challenge to the hegemonic, Western order or global order. About joining, the issue of Bangladesh joining BRICS is, I think it needs a lot of thoughts and discussions. It's just we cannot jump into the bandwagon, and think that this is a good idea, because it also needs lots of discussions. The position of Bangladesh as the issue of security has been raised. So Bangladesh joining these BRICS, the question is to what extent our politics, our political institutions, our bureaucracy are prepared, because it depends a lot on negotiations and bargaining. To what extent our administrative and political systems are ready for that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We will come to the panelists with these two questions, and if you have any other queries or comments, please prepare those. I will come to Professor 𝐭𝐲𝐻𝐻 with the first one, that the security challenge.
I think in the context of BRICS, security in the security sense, hard security, seems to be not featuring out as of now prominently, although in terms of ideology, in terms of non-security or human security, it does feature out. So that's very clear. There are but there's a larger kind of a issue related to this particular question, which is there a security architecture in Asia or in the Bay of Bengal? No. Unlike Europe, unlike even the Africa or Latin America, the Asia, because of obvious reasons and historical legacies, has not looked at stronger security umbrella for all. Individually, yes, but so that remains a issue, and that's why we nowadays see that there is a debate whether we should have also, remains the Asia, should have also a NATO to provide security, hard security for countries, particularly the smaller countries. But that's a different debate. Thank you.
Okay.
Can I?
Yeah, please.
Can I just 1 minute? I was just pondering on it. Now, when we talk about development, both political economy models, certainly, there was a time when it was dominated by neoliberals. Whether we like it or not, we all seems to have followed it and made huge advancement. So that's something to be reckoned with. But there has always been an alternative. Soviet model of development was a clear alternative, and it actually could not bring the benefits that it was aimed to bring for the people. So that's also very clear. We may not like the capitalist model, but it did bring some substantive gain for people. Now, having said this, the whole, as Professor Tawfiq has said, the Beijing consensus versus Washington consensus, I think there are other consensus also emerging in the world that we need to look at. Neighborhood. India is certainly providing an alternative for development for the developing countries, and that need to be also looked at. So that's one. But I'll differ in one point, if you agree. I think there's a fundamental difference between the Beijing consensus and the Washington consensus. It is not only cut through capitalism versus capitalism, certainly not. Thank you.
It's a very interesting debate. I'm sure that we can have another opportunity to do that. I come to Professor Morshed, if you want to make any comments on Professor Jamil's point that technology and legitimacy, and also this question that are Bangladesh ready? Even in our concept note, we wrote it down that the capacity of the state, we need to look into very carefully, because our negotiation capacity, our kind of a trade capacity, our other kind of the capacity, bargaining and others. So if you just want to make any comments on those comments.
Yes. from a very technocratic economic point of view, well, I'm just saying a very technical economics point of view, the economics literature suggests that countries will benefit from joining as many trade blocs as possible. So you just blindly join a trade bloc. Now, as has been pointed out by Dr. Niaz, that, BRICS is not a trading bloc. So then, if it were a trading bloc, you must join if you're invited. So, as Groucho Marx, in the 1930s, there were these comedy films called the Marx Brothers movies. So not Karl Marx, but so these Groucho Marx was one of them, said, the only club I want to join is the club which won't have me as a member. But the point over here is you join as many clubs as possible. And with Mr. Shahidul Haq, I'll just, clarify the point. Capitalism delivers at certain points. It delivered between 45 and 80, let's say roughly. And after that, it has been gradually evolving into a plutocratic system, in which China is very much a part of. The data speaks for itself, Ambassador. There's a growth in inequality in China. There's a reduction in poverty, but eventually, once absolute poverty is addressed, inequality becomes salient, and inequality contains within it the seeds of conflict. So there will be a lot of conflict. The old capitalist model, which was even pursued in the United States, was redistributive and social democratic. There were plutocratic periods before the First World War, and we have a return to another, even uglier form of plutocracy at the moment, which has to be checked. Okay? And that requires international policy coordination as well, because that requires, taxation on wealth, bank information, and so on. I hope I addressed Professor Ishtiaq's question, but I do not know whether BRICS is a trading bloc or not. It seems to be it's not. But if it is a trading bloc, you join the trading bloc.
Yeah, we'll come to you.
It's more of an investment bloc.
Yeah, we'll come to you, Appa. Just take a few more questions and then we'll come to you. Yeah, sure. So any other questions from the floor? Our students, or yes, please introduce yourselves.
Thank you. So my name is Rayyan Hussain, and I'm a doctoral researcher at the University of Nottingham. I'm here in Bangladesh for collecting my data. And also I'm a lecturer at the Global Studies and Governance at Independent University, Bangladesh. So my question is just that I would like to understand that definitely there is a difference among the BRICS itself, but what would be India's position on Bangladesh joining to BRICS? But how do you want to understand that with the growing indifference of China and India itself, that will there be any concern regarding from India coming up from there? And second of all, in the literatures of the regional and cross-regional frameworks, we often see that developing countries joining part of these mechanisms is a ceremonial thing. So will BRICS be another ceremonial join for Bangladesh or not? Thank you.
Very, very good. Very interesting questions. Anyone else? Yes, please. Yeah. Use your microphone.
Hello, my name is Ayat, and I'm a student of EC department. So we're already having issues going with the US as well as European Union regarding our sanction, the present visa principle that also affect students also who are studying or willing to study overseas. Considering that Malaysia's economic ties with various countries hold different weights, how can it strike a balance between its economic interest within BRICS and its commitments to other partners? As an upper middle economic country and member of G20, Indonesia is classified as newly industrialized country, just as Indonesia faces challenges in aligning with both China's overtures and the US's Indo-Pacific agenda. With what diplomatic strategies can Bangladesh employ to ensure that its actions are consistent with its national interests? Thank you.
Very good question. So I will I will come to with the first question to Professor Lalufar and the second question that to Professor Niyaz Asadullah. So the first question is basically what would be the India's position in terms of Bangladesh's application to BRICS, and yeah, please.
The tough one for me. Okay, yeah, and the good one. One thing I just wanted to add before with the last question is that the issue of technology and critical resources is something we have not really discussed here. So you can see that the Niger coup and how the West responded to it, and the crux of the matter is that the existence of a number of critical resources that are supplied to European countries. So we can see the fight in the semiconductor industry between China and America, and especially China placing sort of a ban on export of two critical materials that sort of created a huge sort of economic kind of battle between the West on one side and China on the other. But then Norway came as a savior, as a Norwegian phosphate that was discovered a few months back, and so that would be able to sort of provide a kind of relief for the West in general for the next 50 years or so. So this is another issue, that BRICS countries and their control over production of semiconductor and other sort of technological sort of other materials which are very significant for running the current sort of system. And the second issue is that as pointed out by Ryan, that what would be the role of India. I believe I thought that Sir would be answering to this one, being a diplomat and knowing the inner works, but
Need an academic answer, not a diplomatic answer.
okay. So even as an academic, I'm afraid I'll have to give a diplomatic answer, because we often we have seen the latest a number of writings on different issues in newspapers and to different columns, but always a big country has its own interest to serve. Remember, each and every country serves its national interest. So if we think that what India is doing is unjust to us, think of Bangladesh in that particular position. So this is something I learned last year when I had an opportunity to visit Japan and talk with a number of diplomats there and scholars there, that Japan is learning to live with China, its big neighbor. A big neighbor always has its concerns. A smaller neighbor always has its problems. And as the saying goes with regard to Mexico and America, that we are so far away from God, but so close to America, right? So we are so far away from the rest of the world, but so close to India. So that is a problem we will have. India will have its own national interest, own calculation, and Bangladesh will have its own calculation. I believe that, we have to deal with that diplomatically, because we have to talk and we have to play our cards, that how Bangladesh can be a getaway to Northeast India, and what can Bangladesh hope to achieve I would not like to use the word in exchange or in return, but in comparison. So we have to learn to play our card rightly. And as Sir pointed out, that do we have the capacity to do this diplomatic maneuvering with other countries? Again, Shahidul Haq Sir would be best to answer that, being there, working there for so many years. But I believe that, now Department of IR and FSA, Foreign Service Academy, jointly gives a degree, runs a program, Professional Masters in IR and Diplomacy, PMIRD. So we can see that how promising young diplomats are. So I believe that, yes, only time will tell, but we need to sort of invest more in developing our sort of expert development of expertise in these particular areas. You can see I'm fumbling a little bit because I don't know how to be more diplomatic.
Thank you. Thank you.
This question.
Thank you, Appa. But I think that to answer the question also, that India's position about the membership, not specifically for Bangladesh, is a general position for Brazil and India. They want to have a framework first, criteria to be decided before allowing anyone. It's not specifically for Bangladesh or Indonesia or for other applicant countries. So, and that's basically because probably India is very cautious that they don't want to see that BRICS becoming a bloc dominated by the Chinese and Russians kind of a political agenda. So that's their kind of the national interest. Now coming to the second question, Professor Niaz Asadullah, I'm sure that have you heard the question clearly that, or if I can summarize, if I also did understand.
Yes, please, I'll appreciate.
The student's point of view, he started with sanctions. Bangladesh faced some sanctions from US, and there are concerned by the population in the country and especially the students that because most of the students they want to study in the Western countries, not much in the BRICS countries. So probably that's why they are worried that how this a kind of a perceived tussle between the West versus Bangladesh might affect their future study aspiration. And he brought a kind of example of Indonesia. And he said that Indonesia is very successfully maintaining very close relation with those Western blocs and also close relation with China and Russia also. So Bangladesh, whether it's also having that capacity and also whether there any aim of doing the same kind of the foreign policy balancing, if I can understand the question properly. But I think that sanction question is also very important because there is a hunch within some analysts that the sanction probably forced the Bangladesh's decision to make it quickly to jump on applying for a BRICS membership. So few questions and 2 minutes, sir.
Okay, so I'll try to answer as I have read the question. So, what I can see here is if I'm to put aside domestic development in Bangladesh, but what we are seeing is this interconnectedness of our aspiration to develop our youth through human capital development and our geopolitics. So one thing that comes to mind is what happened to China, Australia, when the relationship worsened because Australia was siding with the transatlantic US move. So Chinese government kind of stopped trade with China, and that led to this exodus of Chinese students away from Australian universities. But guess what, where they went? Singapore and Malaysia. So the point is that it is not just enough for us to make noise about ending the dominance of the global north when it comes to the capitalist system of financing development. It is equally about investing in our own capacity to train our own youths and citizens in the global south. And that's where there has been a terrible failure. So talk about India, it is now the hub for the third world quality education system, saving up a few higher education universities. But where there is hope is China, the rise of top-class universities in China and also in many parts of Asia, including Japan, Malaysia to some extent trying to project itself as a global hub for southern countries, youths and talents. So we therefore not just have to diversify trade, we also have to, I think, give our youths a very diversified set of choices when it comes to developing their own capacity. Bangladesh has failed terribly, therefore domestically in terms of widening that choice. Apart from few good universities like NSU, they are forced to go overseas. But what if BRICS also pull its energy and resources to come up with a human capital challenge to the global north? I think I'll stop with that provocative question and let my colleagues in the panel to respond. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We don't have much time. Just last 1 minute, if the panelists want to say any last words before we conclude. Okay.
I think because Professor Niloufar has been pointing finger at me, I think since I kind of split my time between Delhi and Dhaka, so I get a little bit of a pulse from both the countries. And picking up from that pulse, I think India is strongly in favor of Bangladesh joining any grouping, any kind of an association, including the BRICS, because it itself is a member, and it'd like to have friends in the group. So there shouldn't be any hesitation because I know people are trying to say that India is not in favor. That's not the question. It's nothing to do with Bangladesh. What India is suggesting, and there's already a paper actually in the BRICS long before this membership hype came into onto the table, is that how do we open membership? What is the procedure? And it's very logical. So they are working on it. Hopefully one day it will be over. But as long as the India support to Bangladesh is concerned, given the strong relationship that these two countries currently enjoy, both at the leadership level and other levels, I think there's a strong support. Thank you.
So any last comments or? Yeah. Sir, any question?
Oh, I definitely think that, this is not a bad idea, because I personally subscribe to the liberal peace idea, where there are three pillars to the liberal peace: common values, preferably common democratic values, a true democracy, not just elective democracy, but true liberal democracy. The other is economic interdependence, and that I prefer the multilateral system to what the geoeconomics we are seeing now. And of course, the common membership of international organizations. And as far as I'm concerned, the more the merrier, even though I would like to join the club, which will not have me as Groucho Marx said.
Thank you very much. And with that, we would like to just conclude this event. I think it was a fascinating discussion, and probably this is the first time in academic institution that this kind of discussion has been happening. But what do we understand that we need more to discuss, more to do research, and then giving the policy directions or suggestions to the government of Bangladesh that what to do and how to proceed with these things. I will just conclude by saying one information that the Center for Peace Studies of the South Asian Institute of Policy and Governance is going to organize another policy colloquium on this Thursday, 24th of August, a day before of Rohingya Genocide Day, in commemoration of the Rohingya Genocide Day, which is basically 25th of August. The title of the colloquium would be Rohingya Repatriation, Who Decides and Why? And it will be a very interesting discussion in the same room, in the same place. And our foreign friends and the others can also join virtually or online. So I'm inviting you all to come and join to that policy colloquium on 24th. So with that note, thanking you all.